class, and I want to bring it up briefly again. Do any of you remember what Socrates was martyred for? Anyone?
Oh, it was going against the state or something.
Yeah, among other things, it was corrupting the youth.
Yeah.
Well, in the 1950s and 60s, when comic books reached popularity with their daring heroes and their dark villains, we said that corrupted the youth too. And then, you know what? When TV came around right after that, that corrupted the youth too. And then, in the last 20 years, computer and console video games have reached soaring heights of popularity. And now we're saying that's corrupting our youth. When new forms of entertainment or information come along, we're often uneasy about them. And as Billy's pointed out, things that we don't understand make us uneasy. They scare us, and we're not sure how to make of them. So today, I'm here to talk to you about whether or not video games cause real-life violence. And I want to show you that violence in video games does not correlate to violence in real life. And I'm not a video game fanatic. I'm also not a video game critic. I really don't have any vested interest in this. I really want to help you guys understand what the issue is, help you see both sides of it, and hopefully help show you develop more tolerance and understanding for this often criticized and unjustly judged form of entertainment. So there's two stories here that we need to understand to really get a good scope on the issue. And the first is of a little boy named Jose Rhet. He's 12 years old. October 21st last year, he took a 9mm semi-automatic pistol to school with him. And before the first bell, he terrorized hundreds of fellow students and staff. And that's according to a report released by the local police department just last week. And the media suggested that it was because he was a voracious video game player. They pointed out that 47 of his 69 video games were violent-themed or first-person shooter-based. They also pointed out somewhere in there, oh yes, that he'd recently been diagnosed with a depressive disorder. He was prescribed Prozac. Katie just pointed out that antidepressants have a serious effect on how we view things. He was seeking mental health treatments, and he carried with him at all times pictures of the Columbine shooters. He stated specifically in his suicide letters to his parents that video games had no influence on his decision. And yet the media still wanted to point these things out. Really, he was no more influenced by Halo's Master Chief than he was by Columbine's Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris. The second story is about the millions of other video game players. Did you know that the Call of Duty franchise alone has sold 140 million copies to date? There are millions of video game players out there, and if they're so dangerous, why haven't we seen crimes from all of them? This brings me to my first point, rather. In a country where video games make a $12 billion annually revenue, our crime rates are actually dropping, not only in juveniles, but across the board. The CDC reported in 2013 that the rates for young males being arrested, males aged 10 to 24, being arrested for violent crimes dropped by half, from 850 to 423 per 100,000 between the years 1995 and 2011. Now we saw a similar drop between homicide rates, which dropped from 25 to 12 in the same group in the same years. So if these video games are so dangerous and they're so influential in our aggression, why have we seen a drop in violent crime rates lower to what we've seen in almost 50 years in this country? Now, I'm not saying that video games cause that. That would be a fallacious argument. But I do want to point out that according to an article in the Huffington Post, 91% of young people, and that amounts to roughly 64 million, are playing games, playing violent games at that. And we're still seeing a drop in our crime statistics. So you tell me how we're seeing an epidemic in aggression due to these games. Now, I told you in my thesis that I wanted to point out that video games don't cause real-life violence. There's a study released in 2012 from Texas A&M. It was conducted by Dr. Charles Ferguson. And he did a longitudinal study with a small group of about 165 young boys, and he looked for increased signs of aggression over 3 years. And what he found was that when they accounted for confounding factors like depression, like witnessing family violence and peer pressure and exposure to other violence, they found that video games didn't really have much effect. In fact, he found video games had no negative effect when those other factors were accounted for. Another study, published in 2006 by the American Sociological Association, stated that it's equally likely that more aggressive people seek out more violent forms of entertainment. They go on to note that aggression can cover a wide variety of emotions and behaviors and is not, I repeat, is not synonymous with violent. And I know there's a lot of research out there that gives results exactly opposite of what I just told you. And I think a lot of the controversy behind this is that there's a simple misunderstanding behind the mindset of gamers. A lot of people have stated that video games just primes people to fill the roles that they're playing in the games. And I agree. I agree that we all want to be someone else sometimes. I agree that we all want to do things that we don't have to pay consequences for. And that's the beauty of what video games have to offer. Because they give they give us the chance to act these fantasies out in the virtual world without harming people in real life. Another study conducted by the same Dr. Ferguson at Texas A&M, as well as independent research at Harvard from 2012, studied the motives behind video game playing, and one of the top reasons was catharsis. They said specifically, getting my anger out is one of the top reasons I play games. So rather than taking it out in the real world, they're getting it out virtually. They actually found that the more violent the game, the more emotional release there was. There's a positive correlation there. And ultimately, that's what a lot of the research on this topic is. It's correlation. There's very, very little or no causal link in these studies. Sometimes A just happens to be in the same room as B with no other meaningful correlation. And that's what we see here today. So there's actually, additionally, 288 criminologists, sociologists, and psychologists sent a petition to the APA, the American Psychological Association, addressing their recent stance on video game violence. And they cited 3 reasons that the APA should reevaluate their decision. The first was researcher bias. And the second was that there was no causal link. And the third was that the way these researchers were defining aggression was both widely varied and inconsistently measured. I've given you guys a lot of reasons why I feel that video games do not cause violence in real life. And I know that a lot of you were opposed to this at first. I hope I've opened your mind to at least what the other side has to say about the story. And I want to leave you with this. 4 people in this room indicated that they enjoyed playing violent or first-person type games. Are you afraid?